Well, good morning, everyone. As Chris says, my name is Karen Bell, and I do have the phenomenal opportunity of being the British Consul General across a 5-state area: Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, New Mexico, and of course, the great state of Texas. This is my first visit to El Paso, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I have to say, it's also my first TED Talk. And as far as our institutional memory has been able to tell us, it's also the first time that any British diplomat in the US network has done a TED Talk. So this is pretty groundbreaking stuff for a Saturday morning. Anyway, I understand that what I'm supposed to do this morning is talk to you about something I care passionately about. And so I wanted to talk to you about a relationship. Now, this is my shameless attempt to get you all on side. The fine-looking furry fella in the red collar, that's my dog Murray, who I adopted on our last overseas posting in Hong Kong. And next to him is his best friend forever, Luna, who is another rescue pup from Hong Kong. And then the equally fine-looking couple behind me. That's me and my husband, Adrian, at one of those buttoned-up diplomatic functions you probably imagine folks like me going to. Turns out Adrian and I have been married nearly 30 years, which is something I really struggle with. Anyway, not the being married part, just the fact it's 30 years. Anyway, this is not the relationship that I've come to talk to you about today. The relationship I wanted to talk about this morning is the one that exists between the UK and the US. And that's the one we like to refer to as the special relationship. So what I'd like to spend a few minutes doing this morning is thinking about what that looks like in 2016 and how we can collectively ensure that it remains special for the future. Now, I've come to realise over a few years of sort of relationships that it's good occasionally to check in with one another and make sure that we're all on the same page. It's also good to talk, and you guys seem like quite a friendly crowd, so I'm gonna see if we can get a little bit of interactivity going here. So what I'd like you to do, if you could, without thinking too hard about it, is maybe shout out 1 or 2 adjectives which spring to mind when and if you ever think about the United Kingdom. So go ahead, don't be shy. Let's have them. Thank you. I was bound to be that. That's not an adjective, sir, but thank you. Anyone got any describing words for me? Also not an adjective. Brilliant. Okay, so I've heard a couple. Brilliant, I like. Somebody came up with historic. We do tend to get ones like historic, old-fashioned, traditional quite a lot. We ran a survey a couple of years back, and it turns out that quite a lot of Americans tend to think about history when they think about the UK. The PBS watchers in the audience will recognise the image behind me as being from Downton Abbey. And for those of you who don't watch PBS, I'm here to tell you it's not a documentary. Maybe when you're thinking about your fish and chips, and thank you for that, sir, you're thinking about London, our capital city. And it's a Saturday morning, so perhaps some of you were even thinking about maybe going shopping in Oxford Street. These are good things to do. Maybe some of you, back to that whole tradition thing, also might have been thinking about the royal family. The Queen, she turned 90 this year. She's now our longest-serving monarch. She's been on the throne for 64 years. And during that time, she's met no fewer than 12 serving US presidents. And alongside her, we've got the next 3, our future heads of state. So we've got the Prince of Wales, Prince William, and, of course, Prince George. Now, we're incredibly proud of them. They do a phenomenal amount of good for the UK. The younger royals in particular are our super A-listers, and we're thrilled to have them, very proud of them. But history is not the only thing that I'd like you to be thinking about when you think about the UK, or indeed fish and chips or Brexit. So if I was to ask you to think about a car made in the United Kingdom, maybe some of you would think about the one that's on the screen behind me. That's the Mini. It's a design icon. It's been around for over 50 years now. And it's a great car. In fact, I'm starting to think I'd like one of these as my next official car as Consul General, because I think this would be a really cool thing to turn up in. It would, right? But you know, this car here is also one that we make in the UK. This is a McLaren supercar, and this is just one of 8 different brands of super or sort of really awesome sports car that's manufactured in the UK. We have over 100 specialist car manufacturers, which sometimes comes as a surprise to people. We're also home to no fewer than 8 out of 11 Formula One racing car teams, which is one of the reasons I'm really excited that F1's coming back to Austin next month for the Grand Prix. And I shall be there cheering on Lewis Hamilton and hoping he's going to repeat his victory last year. Also, London. I mean, I showed you a picture of Oxford Street, our skyline. But London's changing too. Now, this is a bit of a self-indulgent one for me because this is at the design stage, but this is a new project that's going to create what will effectively be a floating park over the River Thames. And I think that's really just inspiring and awesome stuff. I have to say one of the reasons it's there is because the designer behind it is a guy named Thomas Heatherwick, who's an absolutely inspirational figure who, amongst other things, designed the brand new double-decker buses in London and the absolutely stunning cauldron that kicked off the 2012 Games in London. But the other reason it's there is because I had the huge privilege of meeting him while I was in Hong Kong. And I'm still on culture. Now, those of you in the room who are much cooler than me, and that's most of you, don't mind, I'm not going to lie, will recognise this chap as Theon Greyjoy, one of the characters from Game of Thrones. And apparently he's had a pretty grisly year. The reason that's there is because I just wanted to take a couple of minutes just to sort of think about the huge dynamism that is the UK creative and media scene. So in addition to Game of Thrones, which is filmed in Northern Ireland, you might be surprised to know that over the course of the last 12 months, other really big-name features that have been made there include the latest Star Wars movie, the last Mission Impossible film, Alice in Wonderland Through the Looking Glass, and, you know, the list goes on. And again, bringing that right back to Texas, we're going to be bringing some of that creativity and dynamism back to South by Southwest in Austin next year. We're already the longest-standing international partners at that festival, and this will be our 12th year out. And our presence there just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So while I recognise that from El Paso, Austin's not actually in the neighbourhood, I do recognise it's 800 miles and a time zone away, but, you know, you might want to think about coming to see us there. Right, well, I've just committed the cardinal sin of saying I was going to talk about us and then spent the last sort of 5 minutes really talking about me. So on to the story of us and that special relationship. Now, the guy behind me, I find he is universally recognised here in the United States. It is, of course, Winston Churchill. And it was he who 70 years ago first coined the phrase, the special relationship. Now, he recognised that if the UK was going to get through the darkest days of World War II, we absolutely had to have the closest possible defence and military alliance and partnership with the United States. And 70 years later, I mean, I think it's absolutely true to say that that relationship has seen us through times of peace, times of conflict, it's seen us through times of prosperity and times of economic challenge. And the defence and security aspect of our relationship is still incredibly important. It is uniquely close. No one works more closely in conflicts around the world than US and UK forces. The same is true of the uniquely close cooperation between our intelligence agencies and all aspects of our security infrastructure. We train together, we serve together. Another picture of Prince Harry, and the one that's there to remind me that it was he and, of course, First Lady Michelle Obama, who also led our respective delegations to the Invictus Games in Florida a couple of months ago. And that was a reminder in this week where the Paralympics has started that very often our wounded warriors are also rehabilitating together today. But it's not just about our security. The special relationship is absolutely intrinsic to our prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic. That relationship is worth $200 billion a year, and it's responsible for 1 million jobs on each side of the Atlantic. That's 1 million Americans working for British firms, 1 million Brits working for American-owned companies. And here in Texas, the UK is the biggest source of foreign direct investment, and I think that's true in practically every other state around the US. I suppose I do have to say something about Brexit. You guys will have noticed that on the 23rd of June this year, the UK had what was probably our biggest democratic exercise in a generation. 33 million Brits went to the polls, and a decisive majority, 52%, decided that we should leave the European Union. Now, the process of extricating ourselves from our European Union membership is going to take some time and won't kick off in earnest until next year. So we've got a lot of groundwork to do in the coming months and years. While we will, I'm sure, want to maintain the closest possible economic relationship with our partners in the European neighbourhood, for us, this just feels like a huge opportunity to deepen and broaden and expand our connections with the rest of the world too. And I can tell you that I and my colleagues around the world are feeling very sort of excited and positive and confident about what this means. And nowhere is that more true than here in the US. I can tell you, you are going to be hearing more from us in NATO, the UN Security Council, G7, G20, you name the multilateral alphabet spaghetti. You're going to be hearing more UK. But from the bilateral relationship side, it hasn't escaped our notice that all of you have got some very big decisions to make this year too. It would be a very brave, a very courageous Consul General to make any attempt to comment on or speculate on the range of choices before you. I think all I will say is that whatever the outcome in November and whoever's in the White House by next January, that will continue to be our most important bilateral relationship anywhere in the world, and that's for certain. But anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing to ensure that the special relationship really remains relevant for today and also that we're protecting it for the future. And the picture I've got behind me now is of our former Minister of State at the Foreign Office, Hugo Swire. And this was him giving an interview at the Univision studios in Houston about 4 months ago. And of course, that's the leading Spanish language network. And he was there talking about UK policies and priorities in Latin America. Now, the reason he was doing that was because we recognise that the face of the US, the shape of the US, your demography is changing. And one of the great privileges of my job is that I recognise this part of the world in particular gives us an almost unique insight into what the whole of America in 15 or 20 years is going to look like. So we know there are going to be a generation of Americans with different reference points, different family connections, different cultural touch points. And so we've taken an absolutely strategic decision to connect with that, and we want to be a part of it. And it's one way that we're kind of committing for the long haul. In any relationship too, well, in most relationships, it's good to think about the kids. And so this is my opportunity to tell you a little bit about our Marshall Scholarship Programme. Now, this is an incredibly prestigious programme that we run across the United States, which enables 40 really highly talented young Americans to pursue their graduate studies at any university of their choice in the UK. It's a highly, highly selective programme. We are selecting for academic prowess, but we're also looking for future leaders and for ambassadorial capability. But what I will say is that we're also absolutely committed to ensuring that the broadest, most diverse range of students have access to it, which is one reason that we were so excited to get our first successful scholar from UTRGV 2 years ago. Now, this was a first-generation student. She was the first person in her family ever to go to college, never mind study abroad, and we were so proud of her. And we would love, in due course, El Paso, to see some successes from UTEP. So let's keep our fingers crossed for that. You'll have spotted I like dog pictures, so here's another one. This is the corgi that was at the front of the British consulate's presence at Pride in Houston last year. And next Sunday, I'm going to be leading what will probably be a slightly less flamboyant delegation from the British consulate at Pride in Dallas. Now, it's not just us, it's not just here in the Southwest. I think we're the only diplomatic network here in the US who are a regular feature at Pride around America, and in fact, around the world. And the reason we do this is not just because we like a good party, although we do like a good party. It's one way that we kind of signal our commitment to inclusive, tolerant societies, and we want those around the world. It's another way that we try to connect with the broadest range of America that we possibly can. And increasingly, we recognise that this is just plain economic good sense too, which is why, for example, something else that I did a couple of months ago was host a reception for the newly formed LGBT Chamber of Commerce in Houston, where we had a Scottish gin tasting. fun fact for you, 70% of the world's gin comes from Scotland. I didn't know that beforehand. I can tell you it's delicious. I'm working my way through the list. Right, we're starting to wind up, so I'm just going to allow myself some indulgent images now, and these reflect some of the really super fun stuff I've got to do as Consul General over the last 12 months. This guy's Tim Peake. He's the British astronaut who I had the phenomenal privilege of watching launch to the International Space Station from Mission Control in Houston and seeing him return in June. Now, I think that that's just an absolutely marvellous example of how the special relationship is taking us beyond our earthly bounds and into space. It really is the next frontier. I've got this one here too, another bit of self-indulgence, I'll admit it to you. That's not just because I like David Beckham, but I do. It's also, and so for those of you who don't recognise him, he was a former captain of the England football team. And he's here because my son is an absolute soccer nut and would not have me talk about the UK without mentioning football. However, I've also got a picture of the NFL for you to close with. That's for two reasons. One is because I have been in Texas long enough to be really excited about the upcoming start of the NFL season. And I am not going to tell you which team I'm going to be rooting for, because I know that's a hiding to nothing. Let's just say if they're in Texas, I'm behind them. But it's not just that. I'm also super excited about Super Bowl coming to Houston next year and have somehow managed to wangle my way onto the International Host Committee. So really a football fan. But the main reason it's there is because some of you may not be aware that London is now the European home of NFL. Next month, 3 games are going to be played in London. They're all sold out. And it's just one more way in which our cross-cultural sort of communication is helping to bring us together in ways that are keeping the relationship special. So I think that's all something that we can all be very pleased about. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.